It was never supposed to turn into anything serious. Honestly, it started out as just a thrill, a momentary escape. But looking back now, it's become one of the things I regret most in my life. People have found out. They've read about it. And I keep wondering, have you ever made a mistake so big, it feels like it's crushing you? How do you move on from something like that? I know I really messed up. I mean, I screwed up in a way I never imagined I would, and the guilt eats at me every single day. But the truth is, I don't know how to fix it. I'm 40 years old. My husband's 45. We've been married for 7 years now, and we have a 5-year-old son together. We actually met through a mutual friend who set us up, kind of casual at first. Neither of us was looking for anything serious at the time. We were just two people having fun, going with the flow. But something clicked between us. We connected, and before long, we made it official, we were exclusive. 2 years into dating, we tied the knot. My husband works as a software engineer at Google, and I'm in sales at an insurance company. For a while, everything at home felt just right. Life was good. We had what we needed: stability, love, a family. But then I made a huge mistake and shattered all of that. It all began about 5 months ago. That's when my husband got promoted. Great news, right? But the promotion meant longer hours, more responsibility, and a lot more stress. He started coming home late, and when he did, he was completely drained, too tired to talk, let alone be affectionate. Our intimacy just faded away. I tried to get close to him, but he'd brush me off, saying he was exhausted or making up some excuse. I tried not to let it get to me, but honestly it did. The way he was acting really started to wear on me. So, I poured myself into work instead. Around that time, our company had its eyes on landing a big client. I was doing everything I could to make it happen. My promotion basically hinged on signing this guy. His name was Ryan, 48 years old, ran a small fintech company. If he chose our corporate health insurance plan, it would have been a massive win for us. I was in charge of the whole thing, reaching out to him, explaining all the policies, answering questions, the works. My boss made it crystal clear, we needed this deal. The market wasn't doing well, and clients like Ryan could make all the difference. He told me not to be overly formal with him. Build a rapport, he said. Be friendly, not just businesslike. So I followed that advice. I dialed down the stiff professionalism and tried to be more approachable with Ryan. At the same time, I was still struggling with the distance at home. I tried not to let it eat me up, but it was tough. The rejection, over and over, was getting under my skin. Eventually, I snapped and asked my husband directly, "What's going on? Are you not attracted to me anymore? Is there someone else?" He told me I was overthinking it. Said he was just stressed from work, and that I was making a big deal out of nothing. I took his word for it. After that, I stopped trying in the bedroom altogether. With our son away at summer camp, the house felt emptier than ever. I wasn't in any rush to head home after work. When our kid was home, the little bit of time my husband and I had to ourselves usually felt warm and intimate. But now, it just felt cold. Lonely. We barely spoke. Intimacy was completely off the table. Meanwhile, things with Ryan were moving along. We had regular meetings, and honestly, he was a charming guy. Kind of funny. And yeah, he was easy on the eyes too. Because corporate health insurance has so many moving parts, we'd often meet over lunch or coffee to go over everything. I tried to keep things strictly business, but the lines blurred. Ryan had this way of flirting that was subtle, nothing overt, just small comments that could go either way. At first, I brushed it off. He was single, sure, but I figured he was just being friendly and I was reading too much into it. Then one day, during lunch, I accidentally spilled water on my shirt. I noticed him glance down and linger a little too long on my chest. I quickly changed the subject and started talking about work again. He looked up at my face, and something about the way he looked at me, it made me feel something. I felt noticed. Desired. That probably says a lot about where I was emotionally. My husband hadn't really looked at me like that in a long time. I knew it wasn't right to crave that kind of attention from someone else, but I was starved for it. Being constantly rejected had started to chip away at my confidence. Ryan and I had become somewhat friendly outside of work, too. He began inviting me to meals that weren't about business at all, and honestly, I didn't resist. It felt nice to be wanted, even if it was just a distraction. I didn't plan for it to go anywhere. I kept telling myself that. It was just an escape from the silence at home. By now, my husband was practically living in his office. When he did come home, I was usually already done with dinner. He'd eat, say a few words maybe, then head straight to bed. It started to feel like he was just staying at a hotel, not really living with us. Since I had stopped making any effort toward him, he didn't make any either. And the way he carried himself made it clear he wasn't going to any time soon. I hate that this is how things unfolded, and I know I shouldn't have done what I did. But I couldn't stop myself. One afternoon, Ryan took me out for lunch again. And without even thinking much, I started rubbing my foot against his leg under the table. He looked at me, and I could see it in his eyes. He was definitely into it. And in that moment, I just felt tired. Tired of being invisible in my own home. That night, I crossed a line I swore I never would. I went home with Ryan, and I slept with him. When I woke up in the middle of the night, I felt this heavy guilt sitting on my chest. Ryan was still asleep, and I quietly left. I didn't even know what to say to him. I just got in my car and drove home. There were 2 missed calls from my husband on my phone. I prayed he had already gone to bed by the time I got home. I didn't want to face him, not like that. When I walked in, he was sound asleep. I let out a quiet breath of relief, then went straight to the shower. The next morning, he casually asked where I had been the night before. I told him I had a late work meeting. He didn't even question it, just nodded and kept eating his toast. I felt horrible for lying. But at the same time, I was still hurt. His indifference cut deep. I told myself I wouldn't see Ryan again. The deal was nearly done anyway, and soon I wouldn't need to meet with him anymore. I had a family, a husband and a little boy. I couldn't keep making reckless choices like that. After making that decision, I threw myself into work and tried to tune everything else out. My husband's indifference had been weighing on me for a while, and he didn't even seem to notice. That week, I buried myself in my job. Stayed late at the office every evening, because honestly, no one was waiting for me at home anyway. Our son was still away at summer camp and wouldn't be back for another month. I tried checking in with him throughout the week, but he was so caught up in his little adventures that I barely got more than a few words out of him. At least he was having fun. Ryan didn't call or message me after that night. I can't say I was surprised, but it still felt off. Even though I told myself that it was a one-time mistake, I guess some part of me expected a text, a call, something. But nothing. Then Friday rolled around. I was leaving work, just walking out like it was any other day, and there he was, Ryan, waiting outside my office. To say I was shocked would be an understatement. He walked right up and hugged me like he'd missed me. And honestly, that threw me off. I told him straight up, what happened between us couldn't happen again. I said it was a mistake. But he didn't buy it. I remember the way he looked at me when he said, "You can't pretend there's no attraction between us." That hit me hard. And just like that, all the resolve I thought I had? Gone. I kissed him. Right there. We ended up in his car, messing around like reckless teenagers. I'd never done anything like that before, in a car, in public. It was wild. And I loved it. Afterwards, I told him I'd call him later, then went to my car and drove home. My husband came in not long after, barely said a word, went to bed without even acknowledging me. I showered, trying to wash the guilt off, but my mind was already made up. I told myself maybe it was selfish, maybe it was wrong. But with Ryan, I didn't feel invisible. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something. I knew there'd be consequences eventually. But honestly, that voice inside me just said, screw the consequences. And that's how my affair with Ryan started. He knew I was married. He knew I had a kid. And surprisingly, he was okay with it. I told him we had to keep things discreet. No public places, nothing too risky. Ryan agreed. He said we could still hang out like before, just like colleagues or friends. I figured that would work. Turns out, I didn't have to hide much anyway. My husband never asked many questions. He might have mentioned in passing that I was getting home late, or that he couldn't reach me, but any vague excuse I gave was enough. He didn't press. And instead of feeling relieved, I just felt more invisible. It wasn't that he trusted me. It was that he didn't care enough to notice something was off. Ryan and I started seeing each other regularly. If he had time, he'd pick me up after work. We'd meet for lunch or dinner, sometimes hook up in the car or the elevator if we were feeling bold and there were no cameras. It sounds crazy, but the danger made it exciting. I had never felt that kind of thrill before. Honestly, being with Ryan opened up something in me. All those years of routine and being brushed aside, I'd forgotten what it felt like to be wanted. And now, every moment with Ryan felt electric. I started thinking, maybe this is what I was missing with my husband. But life isn't a fairy tale. You take what you get, and I was taking what I had. 2 months later, our son came back from summer camp. Life shifted again. I had to readjust, work around his schedule. At first, that meant less time with Ryan, but I found ways to make it work. I rearranged things so we could still see each other without it affecting my time with my son. There was no plan or endgame to this thing with Ryan. I didn't know where we were headed. One day, I admitted that to him, that I didn't know what we were even doing. But Ryan just smiled and said, "Let's not overthink it. One day at a time." And you know what? That was exactly what I needed to hear. Reassurance. Something I never really got from my husband, even before his promotion. Sure, that new role at Google had made him busier, but truth be told, he'd always been obsessed with work. The promotion just made things worse. I'd been the one running the household, handling everything for our son. The mental load was all mine. And now, I didn't even have the scraps of attention he used to give on the weekends. But with Ryan in the picture, I stopped caring as much. I had something to look forward to again. The attention, the intimacy, the feeling of being seen, it was all there. And slowly, I started noticing how little I was affected by my husband anymore. I saw it clearly now, he didn't care about me. Not the way a partner should. He never tried to touch me, not once. And sure, I didn't want that anymore anyway, but it still said everything. I thought about leaving him. I really did. But the idea of breaking up our family made me freeze. As much as he failed me as a husband, he was a great father. Our son adored him, and he did genuinely show up for our kid. If there was one thing that pulled him out of his work bubble, it was our son. And I couldn't take that away. I didn't want shared custody. I didn't want my baby being passed back and forth like luggage. I chose to stay for my child. Whatever love I had for my husband had been fading for a while. At this point, all I cared about in that house was my son. He was my center. Funny thing is, for the first time in a long time, I was happy. Work was going great. Things with Ryan were better than I ever expected. And at home, well, things were as good as they could be under the circumstances. My husband stayed buried in work. I doubt he would have even noticed if I disappeared. To make sure I still had time with my son, I'd hang out with Ryan during lunch breaks. That way, after work, I could go straight home and be mom. Ryan was incredible about it, always adjusting to whatever I needed. He didn't complain, didn't pressure me. Just accepted it all. He was so understanding that it almost felt unreal. I thought I had it all under control. I really did. But life has a funny way of knocking you down just when you think you're standing tall. Turns out, I was completely wrong. Everything spiraled downhill so fast, I didn't even have time to process it. One Friday afternoon, my phone slipped out of my hand and tumbled down the stairs as I was leaving to meet Ryan for lunch. The screen cracked, and it stopped working altogether. I figured I'd deal with it later. There was no way I was going to delay seeing Ryan. He asked if I wanted to skip the rest of the day and go to his place. Since it was Friday, I didn't hesitate. I ditched work and spent the afternoon with him at his house. I made sure to get home around 6, the usual time I'd come back from the office. Everything seemed normal, until I walked in and noticed my son wasn't there. That was odd. He was always home by that time. Instead, it was just Chloe, our nanny. She looked a little frazzled and immediately told me that my son had gotten a high fever at school. His teacher had tried calling me several times but couldn't reach me. My heart sank. My husband ended up answering the call and rushed to the hospital to be with our son. I didn't even wait to grab my purse. I just turned around and drove straight to the hospital, cursing my broken phone the entire way. The guilt was immediate and heavy. I should have been there. My baby was sick, and I was completely unreachable. When I got to the hospital, I saw my husband sitting beside our son, who was softly chatting and telling him stories from school. I rushed to his side. He was doing better by then, thankfully. The fever had gone down. My husband didn't say a word to me. He just gave me a look and then focused back on our son. The doctor came in shortly after and told us it was the flu, nothing too serious, and we could take him home. My husband said he had to get back to the office since he left in a rush earlier, so I drove our son back myself and put him to bed. That night, I stayed in his room with him. I was still shaken up by everything. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to see my husband standing in the doorway, watching us. I gasped a little. He startled me, but then I realized it was just him. He still had his work clothes on. I asked him when he got back, and he said just now. He said he wanted to check on our son before heading to bed. I nodded, but then he asked me a question I wasn't ready for. Where were you when the school called? I told him the truth, or at least a part of it, that my phone had broken. He gave me this look, like he didn't fully believe me. I pointed to my busted phone on the shelf to prove it. The shattered screen said enough. Then he said something that froze me in place. I called your office. They said you left for lunch and didn't return. My stomach dropped. I had no solid excuse ready. I fumbled and mumbled something about a lunch meeting running late. He didn't react. No expression, no follow-up. He just walked away. The next morning, I stayed home with my son but had to run out briefly to handle my phone's situation. Chloe watched him while I went out and bought a new phone. There was no way I was waiting days for the old one to get fixed. The first person I messaged was Ryan. I told him everything, and as always, he was calm and supportive. My husband didn't bring up the conversation again. He went about his morning like nothing happened. For the next few days, everything returned to a strange sense of normal. My son got better and went back to school. I returned to the office and met Ryan during lunch like we used to. But then something unexpected happened again. One Friday, when I got home from work, my husband was already there, before me. That almost never happened. I was surprised, but I smiled and greeted him casually. I was about to go shower when he stopped me. Where were you during lunch today? He asked. I froze. How did he know? Then he explained. He had come by my office. Said he needed my signature on some bank documents. My mind scrambled. I repeated the same excuse I'd given him before, hoping it would stick. He looked at me for a second, then nodded and let me go. But right before I walked away, he whispered, I trust you. That single sentence hit me harder than I expected. The guilt came rushing in, all at once. I cried in the shower. It just broke me. I was cheating on this man, and he still trusted me. And sure, he hadn't been the best husband, but what did that make me? I wasn't any better. In fact, I might have been worse. I knew something had to change. I had 2 options, either come clean and end my marriage or end things with Ryan and move forward with the life I already had. As much as it hurt to think about losing Ryan, someone who had genuinely cared for me, I knew deep down there was no future for us. My marriage might have been broken, but my family wasn't. And I couldn't tear that apart. I made a decision right then. I'd meet Ryan one last time after the weekend. I'd explain everything and end it. But it turns out, I was already too late. The next day was Saturday. I had planned to stay in with my son. I didn't know what my husband's schedule looked like. He barely communicated anything about his time ever since his promotion. Usually, he worked through weekends too. But that day, he stayed home with us. It was unusual. The day before that, he had also gotten home before me. A little alarm bell rang in the back of my mind, but I chalked it up to guilt and paranoia. Then, in the afternoon, after our son went to the park with Chloe, my husband sat down beside me in the living room and said we needed to talk. His voice was calm, unnervingly neutral. I didn't think he knew. I really didn't. But I was wrong. He knew everything. He told me he had started getting suspicious when I began coming home late all the time. But the real confirmation came when our son was in the hospital. That day flipped a switch for him. He admitted he'd been watching me, coming by the office during lunch, checking if I was really where I said I was. And then, without any dramatic reveal or yelling, he pulled out his phone and showed me photos. Photos of me and Ryan. Clear as day. In his car. Kissing. Laughing. Holding hands. There was no room left for denial. I didn't even try to lie. What was the point? So I did the only thing I could. I told him the truth. And then, he asked how it all started. I told him how it all started. How everything began to fall apart right after he got that promotion and started acting like I didn't exist. I laid it all out for him, the way I felt, everything I'd been holding in, and how Ryan made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Wanted. That's what Ryan made me feel. He just sat there with this blank, unreadable look on his face while I spoke. I even told him that I was planning to end things for good on Monday. But he didn't believe a word of it. He actually laughed and said I didn't need to pretend anymore. Said he already knew about my dirty little secret. I told him I was telling the truth this time, that I meant it. But he shook his head and said he couldn't trust anything I said. That's when he started going on about how hard he'd been working, busting his ass, really, so he could give us the life we always dreamed of. He even told me he'd been planning to surprise us with an international trip soon. I know I wasn't a perfect husband, he said, his voice cutting deep. But I never cheated on you. Then he added, I just wanted to give you and our son everything. That's when the tears started coming. I couldn't hold them back anymore. But my crying didn't stop him. He still had more to say. He told me he'd actually wanted to confront me the day before, but he held back. Said he wanted to give me a chance to come clean on my own. That's why he told me he trusted me, he wanted to see what I'd do with it. I knew I'd messed up. Big time. He walked out, leaving me sobbing alone in the living room. But after a minute, he came back and handed me a glass of water. That small act caught me off guard. And then I noticed the envelope in his other hand. The moment I saw it, I knew exactly what it was. Divorce papers. Still, I wasn't ready to face it. I had these drawn up after I saw you in the parking lot, he said. I didn't want to lose him like that. I wasn't ready. But he was. So I took the envelope, my hands shaking. Just like I'd feared, it was divorce paperwork. And right there in black and white, I saw he was asking for full custody of our son. I told him he couldn't do that, it wasn't fair. But he just looked at me and said it was better this way, that our son would be better off with him. I said there's no way I'd sign anything with those terms. He told me it didn't matter what I wanted. He was going to make sure our son stayed with him. He said if I signed without making a fuss, he'd at least let me see our boy. But if you fight me, he warned, I'll tell him everything. I'll tell our son his mom cheated on his dad. He'll grow up hating you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I honestly didn't know if he was serious or just trying to scare me. How could he say something like that? Our son was only 5. Knowing the truth would break him. And I knew my husband, if he said he'd do something, chances were he meant it. He might actually use our child as a weapon against me. And as much as I'd already hurt my son by having an affair, even if he didn't know, it was still wrong. I couldn't let him grow up hating me. I tried to reason with my husband. Told him it didn't make sense to take our boy away when he was always so wrapped up in work. I said our son would be better off staying with me. I begged him, literally begged, not to do this. But it didn't make a difference. My tears, my pleading, none of it mattered. He stood firm and said I had 2 days to sign. Then came the final blow. He said if I didn't cut things off with Ryan immediately, he'd show our son the photos he had of us together. I didn't know if he'd actually go through with it, but I couldn't take the risk. I couldn't have my son traumatized by seeing his mom like that. I wanted a good life for him, something normal, something safe. So after my husband walked away, I picked up the phone and called Ryan. I told him it was over. Ryan knew my son was everything to me, so he didn't argue. He just said to take care of myself and not to hesitate to reach out if I ever needed anything. He didn't know it, but in that moment, I was truly grateful for him. After that, I called my lawyer and told him about the custody terms in the papers. He told me I didn't have to agree to them, that I had the right to fight for full custody too. But I couldn't bring myself to tell him about the blackmail. About the threat to destroy my son's image of me. So I ended the call soon after. I felt trapped. No matter what I did, I was going to lose. If I refused to sign, my son might find out the truth and hate me. If I signed, I'd lose him anyway. In the end, I chose the second option. I signed. Being apart from my son would break my heart, but I couldn't stand the thought of him looking at me with disgust. At least this way, maybe he'd still have good memories of me. Happy ones? My husband looked at the signature and seemed content. He said I had 1 week to explain everything to our son before I moved out. He knew how hard that would be for me. And maybe that was part of his revenge. watching me suffer for what I'd done. I knew I had to face the consequences of my actions, but I never thought they'd come at the cost of losing my little boy. I'd never filed for divorce myself because of him. And now, I had no choice but to leave. Telling my son that his mommy was going away was the most heartbreaking moment of my life. He cried so hard when I first told him, and I broke down too. Just thinking about it now brings tears to my eyes. I told him that Daddy would take care of him, and that we'd still see each other soon. But the pain in his eyes nearly shattered me. Still, I had to put on a brave face, for him. I spent that last week soaking in every second with him. When Friday came, and I dropped him off at school, I told him I wouldn't be home when he got back. He started crying again, and I hugged him tight, promising we'd see each other soon. My husband watched me all week with our son. A part of me hoped that seeing how much I loved him, how broken I was, might change his mind. But he didn't budge. I arranged for movers to take my stuff to a company apartment. It was the only place I could get on such short notice. My husband was there when I left. He didn't show any emotion. And honestly, I didn't expect him to. I knew he didn't have any feelings left for me. He just told me the divorce papers had been filed and that his lawyers would handle the rest. I nodded. I told him to take good care of our son and that I was sorry for everything. He just said he would. He told me I didn't need to worry about our son anymore. I didn't say a word after that. I just walked out of the house. It's been over a month since that day. The divorce is still in progress, but our lawyers said that since it's uncontested, it should be finalized soon. I've moved into the company-provided apartment. Honestly, I didn't have the energy to search for anything else. I could barely keep myself together, let alone go apartment hunting. My ex has let me talk to our son 3 times. That's it, 3 times. And I miss him so much it physically hurts. The only thing keeping me sane is knowing my son is doing okay. I always knew my husband would be a good father, no matter what happened between us. My little boy told me that his dad comes home early now, plays with him, spends more time together. It was bittersweet hearing that. A part of me was relieved, happy even, that my son was getting attention. But deep down, I couldn't help but think, why couldn't he do that when I was still there? Why now? I know it's not fair to blame him for my affair. I made that choice. But it still stings that he's making all these changes now, when it's too late for us. I try to keep my focus on work. It's all I have now, really. I haven't reached out to Ryan since that call when everything fell apart. He hasn't tried to contact me either. I'm thankful for that. With everything going on, being separated from my son, carrying the weight of my own guilt, I wouldn't have been able to handle anything more. The regret eats at me every single day. If I had just not done it, if I hadn't acted on impulse, hadn't opened that door with Ryan, I might still be living with my son right now. Maybe, just maybe, my husband would have come back around in time. Maybe he would have started looking at me again. But instead I cheated. And now here I am. Update. 2 months have passed since I left the house. The divorce was finalized by the court. When my lawyer asked if I wanted anything, property, money, assets, I told him no. I didn't care about any of it. The only thing I ever wanted was my son. And since I couldn't have him, nothing else mattered. My ex has already moved on. My son told me that Chloe, the nanny, was coming out of his dad's room one morning. I was stunned. Chloe's in her early 30s. I couldn't help but wonder, was it that easy for him? Did I mean so little? Then again, who was I to talk? I was the one who had the affair. I was the one who broke us. But that didn't make it any easier to swallow. I told my son that maybe Chloe just forgot something in Dad's room and went back to get it. I didn't want to drag him into any of this. Even if my ex had used him to manipulate me during the divorce, I wasn't about to do the same. I wasn't going to use my son to get revenge. That's not the kind of mother I want to be. Chloe started calling me whenever my son asked to talk to me. For that, I was actually grateful. Maybe she felt a little guilty. Or maybe she was just being kind. Either way, I appreciated it. I started getting weekends with my son. Those weekends have become everything to me. Every little second matters now. He makes sure to tell me everything that's happened during the week, what he ate, what games he played, what cartoons he's into. It's like he's trying to make sure I don't miss anything. But the regret never really leaves me. It hits hardest when I have to drop him back off at his father's house, the same house that used to be mine too, Update. It's been a year since I last wrote. My son just turned 6 last month. He's doing well. He's adjusted. He stopped crying for me about 6 months after I left. Now, when I drop him off, he just smiles and waves. It's a strange feeling. Part of me is relieved that he's no longer crying. But another part of me aches. I wonder, does he still miss me? Or has he started getting used to life without me in it full time? My ex-husband is engaged now. To Chloe. They're getting married in 6 months. Yeah. The same Chloe who used to be our nanny. The same Chloe my son caught coming out of his dad's room. It hurts. More than I want to admit. I know I don't have the right to feel this way, not after what I did. But seeing them together in the house I once called home? That's dumb. I found out about the engagement the day I dropped my son off. My ex was kissing Chloe in the doorway, intimately. I don't even remember the last time he kissed me like that. I cleared my throat to let them know I was there. Chloe looked embarrassed, pulled away. My ex, though? He looked pleased. Almost smug. His eyes met mine and he seemed satisfied that I saw them like that. Then I noticed the ring on her finger. We're engaged. He told me, just like that. Getting married soon. I smiled. Somehow. I forced it. But I saw the look in his eyes. He enjoyed watching me feel hurt. And then, just to twist the knife a little deeper, he kissed her again, right in front of me. I kissed my son goodbye and left. That moment stuck with me. Not just because it hurt, but because I realized that this was probably his version of closure. His revenge. He was showing me he moved on, and maybe hoping I'd feel just as broken as he did when he first found out about Ryan. To everyone who's been kind, who didn't judge me and instead offered me understanding, I just want to say thank you. I don't know any of you personally, but your empathy meant the world to me.